In this video, I'm going to argue why the concept of Western civilization is relevant today and why it is important to study the Western tradition. Many people today will blame Western civilization for racism, slavery, imperialism, colonialism, sexism, environmental destruction, and make a number of other accusations against it. But they only do so by ignoring its accomplishments and its values. There is debate as to what Western civilization actually is, whether it is a geographical concept or a tradition of ideas, beliefs, and values. By territory, we often associate the West with Western Europe, and later with its spread throughout the world of the Americas, particularly the United States, and British colonies such as Canada and Australia. We also see a Western influence on places such as China, Japan, and India. Historian Christopher Dawson described the tradition of Western civilization as a blend of the classical world of antiquity with Christianity. Thus, traditionally, we see Western civilization as a transmission and growth of ideas, beliefs, and values that blended the ancient Greek and Roman civilizations with those of Germanic influence, as well as the transforming impact of our Judeo-Christian heritage. Western civilization is important to study and learn from because of its great achievements in science and technology, its institutions of learning and government, and its ideas. Through the study of great books by great men such as Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, St. Paul, St. Augustine, and St. Thomas Aquinas, we can expand our search for truth. Values important to Western civilization include the innate value of the human person, truth and the search for universal principles, justice, charity, self-sacrifice, mercy, patriotism, and liberty. These values do not belong merely to those in the West, but to the world as a whole. As a course of study, it provides sufficient background knowledge in order to continue onward to a specialized study. If you learn about your own culture and heritage first, you will then be able to learn about other cultures. But if you learn first about other cultures while you denigrate your own, then you never learn from your own culture. If we consider Western civilization as a geographical setting, we see differing worldviews or divergent philosophies within it, including liberal and conservative. Alexander Rosenthal-Pubul saw in particular how differently liberals and conservatives view the idea of freedom. The liberal idea of freedom is negative, that every person may do what he or she likes unless it physically harms another person. The conservative notion of freedom, on the other hand, does not see negative freedom as an end in itself. Conservatives connect freedom with virtue, since tyranny exists not only through external restraint, but through one's desires and passions. As Aristotle put it, liberty to do whatever one likes cannot guard against the evil which is in every man's character. In light of this, we might look at an example of an alcoholic. In the liberal idea of freedom, the alcoholic is free if he is able to drink as much alcohol as they want without external obstruction. Whereas in the conservative idea of freedom, he is merely a slave to his cravings, and true freedom comes only with rational self-control. A liberal society is one that is morally neutral, while a conservative one is one that promotes virtue. Added to this concept is the Christian idea of how such freedom is achieved. That is, through God, since we lack the strength to free ourselves from the bondage of sin. According to Pubul, disorders in the soul begets disorder in the commonwealth, to which I would add disorder in the commonwealth begets disorders in souls, which leads to greater measures of coercive power to keep them within bounds. As an example, we might look at recent mass shootings and the failure of liberalism, especially because of its relative notion of truth, to cultivate a virtuous society and virtuous individuals, which then leads to government seeking greater coercive power against individual gun rights through more gun control, thus more tyranny and less freedom. Instead of seeing the West simply as a geographic area, we might also understand the West as a tradition with a common set of beliefs, ideas, and values. This is a non-materialist and religious tradition which is concerned with liberty and the cultivation of virtue, while the liberal materialist view, on the other hand, is focused with power. Many today are more concerned with power than liberty. They would rather have the right to vote for or against certain rights than possess inalienable certain rights. When we see a desire for power instead of a desire for liberty, we see the decline of Western civilization. It is apparent to many that we are currently in the process of the decline of Western civilization, as barbaric practices once extinguished are fostered anew, such as abortion, infanticide, and assisted suicide. Robert Royal noted that today there certainly is material success, but the spiritual, moral, and intellectual grounding on which that material success was built is slipping away. There is certainly a struggle between conservative forces of cultural homogeneity and breakaway forces of cultural pluralism. The greatest danger to Western civilization is not from without, but rather from within. That is, the betrayal of the Western tradition by those in the West. Bradley J. Berzer astutely observed that only the decline in the serious study of the past has allowed critics to make public claims that this complex history may be reduced to an organized conspiracy of white men engaged in protecting their own interests. He continues, how have we managed to tell ourselves that we are rightful inheritors of Plato, Aquinas, and Kant, when the stuff of our existence is more Beyonce and Burger King? As the intellectual pursuit of truth collapses and is replaced by the materialist pursuit of pleasure, so too does Western civilization. In sum, for Western civilization to survive and remain relevant, we must uphold our Western traditions.